The community voted for it, and it's finally here. Axis and Allies North Africa is just a few weeks from doorsteps around the world, and we are thrilled to be able to give you an advanced look at what comes inside. Let's make it hot. Welcome to Board Game Nation. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching. And a thank you to our friends at Renegade Game Studios for providing a copy of this game free of charge. However, as always, the opinions expressed here are mine and mine alone. We're also thrilled to welcome back the sponsor of today's video, CombatMiniatures.org. At the time of this recording, Axis and Allies North Africa is available for pre-order from Combat Miniatures. But stick around. Later, we're going to share an exclusive promo code that you can use to save 10% on this game and so much more. Back in March of 2023, Renegade Games asked the Axis and Allies community to choose a theater for a brand new campaign-level game. The options were Market Garden, the Eastern Front, Stalingrad, and North Africa. After a few weeks of voting, North Africa came out on top. That sent Renegade's senior game designer, Matt Hyra, on quite the journey as he teamed up with Larry Harris and took the lead on building the first brand new Axis and Allies game in a long time. A quick side note. At Gen Con this year, there were a bunch of demos / learn-to-play sessions for North Africa next to all the other Axis and Allies events at S'morey Swamp. Now, each of these sessions had room for 8 players or 2 full games, and they were all sold out. I want to give a quick shout out here to Matt Hyra. He was there teaching every single one of those sessions. Dude was on his feet on those concrete floors for hours and hours and hours, shouting over the crowds, explaining his game to the people that had signed up. Those learn-to-play sessions led to a North Africa tournament, and the final for that event was on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Matt showed up at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning to help set up the board and make sure it all ran smoothly. Now, I'll tell you what, love or hate this game, and I think that you'll love it, but either way, you've got to respect the hustle and dedication from Matt. It was impressive. Oh, and I know that Matt was there for that North Africa final on that Sunday morning because the Board Game Nation team was also there to capture the game history of that event. And we'll have a complete breakdown of that game right here in just a few weeks. So make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell to get a notification when that one is ready. All right, let's crack the plastic on this one and take a look. All right, here we go. North Africa, a World War II strategy game by Larry Harris and Matt Hyra. The box art, I think, looks really sharp. It's in the traditional Axis and Allies style. The box is a bit smaller, though, than most other Axis and Allies games, which I am not mad about. I do like a more compact box. So let's see what we got on the back here. We've got not by strength, but by guile. And there are a lot of aspects to this game where that is going to make a lot of sense because there's stacking limits and supply chains that you've got to keep track of. So it is definitely not a big giant stack game like we've seen some other Axis and Allies games turn into. It's got 2 scenarios. We'll talk about those. Let's crack this bad boy open. All right, there we go. Crastic placked. Yes, that's what I said. I said what I said. There we go. Okay, set that aside. We've got the standard strategy ads from Renegade there. Here's the rule book. It is paper. Nice picture of Larry there with Matt doing research in Morocco, apparently. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So that's fun. We've got a learn to play or a how to play video that's going to be at this link coming soon. So keep an eye out for that. Here's a list of all your components, and we're going to shoot those in just a second, but you're going to want to keep a close eye on those. Victory conditions. Some illustrations. All in all, the rule book is 38 pages long with some optional rules at the end, which is fun, and then a page for credits, of course. And then there is a nice little abbreviated reference chart on the back. And even our experienced Axis and Allies players are going to want to keep this handy because there's some unique aspects to this. Lots of different unit types in this game, so we're gonna get to those. Let's take a look at our setup charts. These pop out and pretty easily. Well, that's done. We got that done. So we've got Rommel's Last Push on one side, and then the other side is Operation Torch. The Americans don't actually join Rommel's Last Push until round 7, which is really when Operation Torch begins. So it's we'll talk more about those in a moment. Here are our markers. It appears they are all 2-sided, which is good. Control markers, which we use for a variety of different purposes in this game. We got landmines, and they're double-sided. They're 2 on one side, 1 on the other. Sea mines are double-sided depending on the power. So the Allies have 6, the Axis have access to 9. So that's interesting. we've got these Allies and Axis reference charts. So you're going to want to keep these handy because they have a number of asynchronous components in them. For example, the German scout car, it attacks and defends at a 2 but moves 3, versus the UK scout car attacks at a 2, defends at a 1, which is obviously much weaker, but it moves 4. So there's some trade-offs like that throughout the game. The UK at different points in the game will have access to a Sherman tank. It'll always have access to the Matilda tanks. Those have different stats. So you're going to want to keep this handy throughout the game. So the map, look at there. All right, we're going to come back to that in just a second. Let's see what else we got in the box. It comes with a piece of styrofoam here, which is really just to give the box a little bit more support. A little box, the top of the box, so that it doesn't kind of cave in on the one side. All right, we've got UK components, which we'll look at more closely. We've got German components. We've got gray and green chips. No red chips in this game. There's pretty severe stacking limits in this game, so you're not going to end up with big giant stacks of. So you won't need red chips or yellow chips or anything like that. Those will be more than enough for this game. There is a bag that is full of spare parts, and these are in case a component gets lost, or if you want to add them into the game. For example, the US doesn't have scout cars in the standard game, but if you want to add them, there they are. And you can give trucks to the French, so on and so forth. So this is kind of a, if you're going to build your own component, if you're going to build your own scenario, this is a way for you to do that, which is pretty cool. Nice of them to include those. We also have the American pieces, of course, and the French pieces are still blue in this game, and they are a very nice bright blue, but there are not a lot of them, so they'll be controlled by the Americans for most of the game. The Italians, of course, have their pieces. This game is played with D10s instead of the standard D6s that we find in all of our other Axis and Allies games, so that's pretty cool. This game comes with 8 of them, and they're colored for each power, though you can roll them as necessary. And of course, because it's Renegade, we have a bunch of extra plastic bags, so that's kind of nice. All right, let me clean this up. We'll look at the map. All right, we are back with the Axis and Allies North Africa map, as it says right there. The map is in 2 pieces. Each of these will fold out into 4 segments. It is a pretty big map. Bigger than most of the other campaign games that we'll find in the Axis and Allies line, but of course nothing compared to the global games. Even, I think it's roughly the same size, maybe a little, it's longer than most games, but it maybe isn't as deep. So it should fit on most kitchen tables, but it's going to take most of the table to contain it. Here are the measurements for this particular board, so you can measure it out if you need to. As we poke around on the map, we can see that there are a lot of different things happening. We've got convoy zones. Basically, these are UK convoy zones. These are things coming from London, coming around the Horn of Africa, through the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, and then up through the Suez to land in Cairo. We've got some islands that are in play. We've got a lot of islands that are not going to be in play. But we've got staging areas, which are what Italy and Gibraltar are. The rules for Malta are very particular. You're going to want to pay attention to those. When sea units mobilize, they don't mobilize in like any other game that we've seen from Axis and Allies before. They're only going to mobilize into the zones that actually have the silhouettes. We've got a coast road that'll take you the full length of the map very quickly in the non-combat phase. A lot of really interesting things. Some of the areas have specific rules that go with them. In Tobruk, land defenders will re-roll on any rolls of a 9 or 10, so you're going to want to keep an eye out for those. Mareth has something similar, so it's definitely worth keeping a track of those. Reinforcement zones, Sahara deserts, which are only passable by scout cars. So there's just a lot of really interesting things happening in this game. One of the highlights of this game really are the new miniatures that have come out, and let's take a look at those. All right, I already went ahead and punched all the markers and supply tokens and mines and everything else, so let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. All right, we've got all of our pieces laid out. We've got our allies to the north, the Italians and the Germans to the south. These pieces on the lower right are the pieces that come in the spare bag. I suggest leaving them in the bag unless you're actually planning to use them. Otherwise, it's going to get a little bit confusing. This game does limit the players to the actual pieces that come with the game in a lot of instances, so you're going to want to make sure to keep those separate. The dice, the chips, the mines, the round counter, of course, and the supply tokens are all part of a shared inventory that all of the players can draw from. But even in those instances, the game is limited to what is actually part of those shared supplies. Let's take a closer look at the minis for each power. As cool as these pieces are, they can always be cooler. CombatMiniatures.org has loads of accessories that can help you take any historical game up a notch or 10. With piles of custom markers, 3D printed miniatures, and over 150 different types of decals, CombatMiniatures.org has everything you need to bring your game to life. So, if you're looking for that hard-to-find miniature, that perfect paint color, or even a whole new game to explore, check out CombatMiniatures.org. You can also pre-order the new Axis & Allies hit dice and IPC chips. Follow the link in the description and use promo code BGN for 10% off your next purchase. Again, use promo code BGN for 10% off your next haul of some of the coolest historical game stuff on the interwebs. The back of the box calls out 6 minis that are new to this game. Let's take a closer look at those. Now that you've been properly introduced to all of your plastic warriors, let's look at the Operation Torch setup for North Africa. Ooh. North Africa is undoubtedly a very cool game, and a must-have for any Axis & Allies fans out there. However, my keen-eyed viewers may have noticed an oddity among the minis, and when I say mini, I mean mini. The UK and US Scout cars are comically small. We've got to talk about these. Now, I first saw these pieces earlier this summer when Renegade sent me an advanced marketing copy so that I could get started working on the how to play video for North Africa. Coming soon. Of course, I noticed this weirdness with the Scout cars the very first time I set up the game. The infantry look like giants standing next to these tiny jeeps. Now, first, I'd like to point out that since my very first Axis & Allies video some 200 years ago, a number of folks in the community have been clamoring in the comments about the scale of the various pieces, particularly when compared to units of the same basic type. American battleships compared to German battleships, that sort of thing. Now, the Allied Scout cars in North Africa are represented by the historically accurate LRDG Jeep, or a Jeep belonging to the Long Range Desert Group. By the way, the unofficial motto of that group was not by strength, but by guile. You might remember that phrase from the back of the box. Pretty cool. Anyway, here's a picture of one of those Jeeps fully restored. Not very big, right? Now, the Axis have the more awkwardly named SD KFZ 231, or, forget my German here, Panzersparwagen. Panzersparwagen, Panzerfahrzeug, I don't know. Anyway, my German is terrible, but in English, it's a heavy armored reconnaissance vehicle. This 8-wheeled beast weighed in at 8.3 tons, stood 9.5 feet tall, so by comparison, the Jeep at just over 2,300 pounds, was a paperweight and basically small enough to roll up and put in your pocket. In fact, they're smaller than our modern day Mini Coopers. I looked it up. Here's a picture of the two Scout cars side by side. I tried to line them up using the soldiers in the image to give you an idea of the size difference between these two vehicles. So it seems to me that Renegade, while trying to hold true to the history of these actual vehicles by accurately representing the difference in size of these reconnaissance vehicles or Scout cars, that they've unintentionally made a piece that nearly disappears when placed on the map. To me, this feels like the unintended consequence of otherwise good intentions. Now, I don't know how or if Renegade plans to address this, but I know that they're aware of the issue, and if we learn more about it, we'll let you know. For now, I suggest that Access players keep a sharp eye on these self-camouflaging UK Scout cars, and we'll see what happens next. Other than the oddity with the Scout cars, which is weird but not game-breaking, and if you're careful, it doesn't really matter that much, I think this game is a home run. The rest of the menus look great, the colors and the layout of the map are very clear and easy to see, even for my red-green colorblind friends. The rules are deep and there is a learning curve, but once players get a handle on all of the nuances, the game does flow really smoothly. I like that each of the rules nuggets can be tied back to some piece of history from the actual North Africa campaign. For example, if you want to know why Scout cars can target air units, read up on Operation Caravan. It's an incredible story. At any rate, I'm really looking forward to seeing the strategies that develop as more and more people get a chance to play this game. With stacking limits and a heavier reliance on supply lines, the strategies and tactics needed to be successful here will be very different than from the mainline Axis and Allies games. As a whole, I think Matt Hyra and Larry Harris and the entire Renegade team did a great job on this game. As for what's next from our friends at Renegade, I'm not really sure. I will say that at their booth at Gen Con this year, I saw a prototype for a new game called Battle for the Deep. It looks to be a fantasy-themed game that's powered by Axis and Allies, and that's literally all I know about it at this point. I gathered that the game will be announced with more fanfare probably early next year. Now, I have heard some other murmurings about another World War II theater-specific campaign game that should be announced soon. Could it be one of the other games that were on the ballot from the poll that Renegade put out last year? Now that we've got North Africa, that would leave us with Market Garden, Eastern Front, and Stalingrad. Now, I think that Stalingrad would be really interesting, but let us know which one you're hoping for in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, now's a great time to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a citizen of Board Game Nation by clicking the join button below to gain access to our exclusive content, giveaways, and special events. Thank you again to combatminiatures.org for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to follow the link in the description and use promo code BGN for 10% off your next purchase. When the video of the North Africa Tournament final from Gen Con is ready, it'll be right here. When our full How to Play for North Africa is ready, it'll be in this general area. For our latest bit of mayhem, right this way. And if you're ready for more from Board Game Nation, click here to subscribe. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.